Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. This is the first presentation of our Holiday Stress Awareness series. My name is Kayla Rogers and I'm an Education and Outreach Coordinator for the Women's Fund. For those of you who are not familiar with the Women's Fund, we are a nonprofit located in Houston, Texas, and we provide women and girls with the tools that they need to be advocates for their health. So all of our programming and publications are completely free. We offer focused seminars like today's presentation, as well as curriculum-based classes and publications. You can visit our website, thewomensfund.org, to download free PDF versions of the publications, or you can also visit the website to fill out a publication request form if you're interested in physical copies. So today we are very fortunate to have Teresa Doyle here to talk to us about how to talk with that family member. We all have difficult family members, especially around the holidays. We might encounter some difficult conversations, and so we are kicking off our awareness series with this wonderful presentation. Before I introduce Teresa, I do want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Kelsey Siebold, for sponsoring the awareness series events. So Teresa Doyle, a psychotherapist, is licensed as a professional counselor, marriage and family therapist, and chemical dependency counselor. She received her MA in psychology with special emphasis in marriage and family therapy from Texas Women's University in 1984. Ms. Doyle has been in private practice for 30 years. She specializes in working with adults, young adults, and adolescents in individual, couple, and family therapy. Depression, anxiety, addiction, and trauma are areas of special interest and experience. In addition, Teresa has been the program psychotherapist for Angela House since September 2002. Angela House is a transitional living facility for women exiting the criminal justice system. At Angela House, she provides weekly individual and group psychotherapy for the residents, as well as facilitating the trauma-specific course Seeking Safety, focusing on healthy coping strategies for both trauma and addiction, and a shame resilience course based on Brené Brown's work. She also teaches the shame resilience curriculum weekly in the Harris County Jail's women's reentry programs. Teresa is a clinical member of the American, Texas, and Houston Associations for Marriage and Family Therapy. She is married and has 2 adult daughters. Her family also includes 4 cats, Sasha, Nova, Maximus, and Mia. So Teresa, we are very grateful to have you here today, and we're looking forward to your presentation. I'll go ahead and turn the floor over to you at this time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you asking me to be here, and I'm happy to be here. I want to make a little disclaimer before we start, because I've had numerous people mention in the last couple of days that they're going, oh, you've got some mascara on your nose, or but I actually hit my nose. So just so y'all aren't going, God, why didn't somebody tell her to wipe that off her nose? I can't. It's there for a little bit. So, and if you didn't notice it, you can all gawk at it now. I was really aware of when Kayla asked about how was my Thanksgiving, and just looking at the holidays right now, that for most of us, they're very different, or just because of size, people who can be there, who can't be there. And I know in any year we have people, close family members that we've lost due to illness, or who are going through treatment and can't be with us now. But this year in particular with COVID, it's kind of brought a whole nother layer of, I guess, new rules, you know, what's going to be the new normal. And it might also bring the opportunity for new rituals as well. Sometimes now, if we're listening to what we're being told, we should have smaller get-togethers. And for some people that might bring up sadness. it might bring up disappointment or grief. And for others, it may be that it's a huge relief, that we're not going to have 30 family members over and have to deal with all of the chaos that comes with that. So what I want to say at the beginning with the changes that are there is that each one of us gives ourselves permission to have the feelings that we have, that there isn't a right or a wrong way to feel when it comes to how are we going to do Christmas? How are we going to handle the holidays? How are we going to handle that special family member? And I think that special family member takes on many different looks when we get together. It could be your loud uncle, the one who has a couple drinks and then he knows everything there is to know about everything, and there's no point in arguing with him, even though most of us think we'll give it our best go, and it really doesn't help the situation. It could also be someone who wants to bring up old family issues at this particular time about what about the time when mom, preferred you, and how are you going to handle that? You can also have someone who is either into their addiction, whether it be drugs or alcohol or whatever substance it might be. How do we choose to recognize that? Do we invite that person? Do we not invite that person? You can also have the family member who is up for the Olympic gold medal in I've had it worse than anybody else. And how do you deal with that? Because it's really hard sometimes to be around that kind of negative energy. Also, we have people who come in, family members who ask imposing questions like, why haven't you two gotten married yet? Or aren't you going to have that baby anytime soon? Or, the mother-in-law or the mom who says, gosh, have you tried Weight Watchers? And our immediate response goes someplace. And unfortunately, a lot of us start thinking ahead of times about how are we going to tackle that? How are we going to deal with it? Which already ups our anxiety. And it is important to be aware of anticipating what the typical conflict or the questions or the know-it-all and how we want to handle it. Because we're the only ones who can control how we choose to handle and respond or not respond. And so we need to be aware of that ahead of time. And I think there are kind of three core elements, I think, to getting through or coping with the holidays and special family members. One is that we need to examine what our expectations are, to be aware of that. And how many of us get caught up in looking at somebody else's Thanksgiving Facebook page and everybody is smiling and getting along, and that's what we think ours should be. And again, we should know that's probably a lie. They didn't show the part where the turkey got burned, or like this Thanksgiving, after I'd made these great mashed potatoes and was wiping the bowl, that it accidentally, half of them went down the garbage disposal because I was leaning over the sink. So something always happens to ruin that perfect image. And so I think we need to be realistic about what's going to happen, what we expect, and to be aware of, are we really expecting the person who's never going to change to come in and have changed miraculously? And sometimes we do. We do want that to have happened. And so we might have to give up that dream for that perfect family get together. But find other ways to handle it. And I think two of the other elements that really go with how do we get through and deal with the holidays, one is self-care. And I think if we have in our heads that we're going to put on the perfect get together, nobody's going to spill anything, nobody's going to make a dumb comment, or someone's going to bring up politics, someone's going to start discussing their favorite conspiracy theory, and that starts to push your buttons and everybody else's buttons. So self-care is, again, looking at what are we doing even prior to and throughout the holidays to take care of ourselves. Are we getting enough sleep? Do we get any exercise? Do we eat healthy food? Because this is the time of the year to get as much unhealthy food into your body as possible. Or it's usually my goal, because I will eat more dressing, mashed potatoes, pecan pies than any other time of the year, which doesn't give us the best care physically. And also, are we, if we're going into this season and thinking we have to put on the perfect dinner or experience for our family, one that will be, forever, in their brain and that'll pull up great family memories, then we might again have to go back to examining our expectations in that's not really taking care of who we are at all, because we only have so much control over what goes on around us. What we have the most control over is ourselves and our feelings and our thoughts and our reactions. And that's what we really need to kind of clue into. And that takes us over a little bit into boundaries. And what are boundaries? Does anybody want to try to answer that?
Setting a limit where you're comfortable.
Perfect. Yeah. Anyone else?
I agree with that.
Okay.
Having very set, cut, not going to tolerate anymore.
Okay. Yeah. I think that, we have to be aware of what are what's our absolute and, what will we tolerate and how much will we tolerate? And boundaries are what we do to say, I'm not going to tolerate this. Or if somebody starts to talk about politics or to say, why haven't you lost that weight? To be able to say, really, I'm not going to go there today. And to be able to remove yourself. And most of us get very uncomfortable with that, because then we're thinking, oh my gosh, I might hurt that other person's feelings. But it's okay if they hurt ours. And it's not a big news flash, but I don't think we get any brownie points or get into heaven any faster by being a martyr and thinking we can do everything all by ourselves, or we're supposed to tolerate everything. I think we have to be clear, and we don't have to be nasty about how we set our boundaries. I think even being calmer about the way we do it kind of comes across better, but also it's clearer. And then you're not the one who goes off into a rampage, and that's the last thing that's remembered, that you didn't handle it well, or you kind of let yourself get onto somebody else's level. Okay. So I think I don't know about you, but I was raised with the idea that you have to make, I came from a large Catholic family, lots of brothers and sisters, and you needed to make enough food for at least 5 more extra large families who were coming by, who might drop in. And I still have a hard time not doing that. And then a week later, after I have given out leftovers to everybody, to go, oh, I'm going to have to throw out all these leftovers, or to start asking people, if you have someone who can help. This year I was very fortunate because my oldest daughter volunteered to come over the Saturday before Thanksgiving and helped me make all of the sides, because I didn't have that Wednesday off or Wednesday late afternoon off. So that took a great deal of pressure out of it, because I think when I had that expectation that I should be able to do it all by myself, then it's easier for me to start to feel overwhelmed and easy to slide into feeling resentful. Then it's really hard to enjoy the people that you're with, rather than when, she offered the help and then I've asked for help because asked my youngest daughter to bring a dessert. She brought a great apple pear crisp, that it just was, it was a time where I felt less stressed. I could be more present and really enjoy my family. And so I think part of the holidays is deciding, back to the expectation, how many people will I have? And who do I really need and want to invite? Do I have to invite somebody who has been toxic for me? And we hate to think that about our family members, but I'm sure most of us have some family member, distant or close, who can be toxic. And do I have to spend time with them? And do I choose to, if I'm going to somebody else's house and they're going to be there, and how do I want to handle that? The other option, if there are old family issues that are going on, I think it's important to think about the possibility, if you want to discuss those issues with that person one-on-one before the holidays, and not get caught up in that scenario during a holiday get-together. So that may be something, that you offer, like, let's meet up ahead of time. If you think there's some point in trying to address an issue. And if you're going to address an issue, I think you have to approach it with compassion for yourself and empathy, and really listen with empathy to the other person's point of view. If we're thinking we're going to go in when we get together with somebody and we have the perfect thing to say and we're going to get them to change, that's not going to happen. So I just want each one of us to be aware of what's truly possible. And I think it's important at that time to maybe take in the serenity prayer and, to accept what we can't change, because we truly can't change somebody else, but to have the courage to change what we can. And when we think we have the power to change somebody else, we are deluding ourselves. Again, it goes back to we only have control over ourselves and our reactions. And so then to think about that ahead of time, about how do I want to handle it? Do I want to count to 10? Or do I want to put a limit and say, when I invite people, and hey, we're not going to talk politics. We're not going to draw a subject out of the hat and say, what's your favorite conspiracy theory this week? So that we can all get into an argument and try to prove the other person wrong, or to sway them into our beliefs. It just doesn't work that way. I think all of us at sometimes have wanted it to work that way, but it's kind of tough to make that happen. Actually, it's impossible to make that happen. The other thing about taking good care of yourselves at a holiday get-together, besides setting boundaries for yourself in whatever form they come, and it might be by asking for help, which is an incredible coping mechanism. But for many of us, asking for help somehow says we can't do it all, and we're still buying into a myth that we can do it all. And we can't. Or as I said, we can, and we can end up resenting it and then not enjoying the people who are there. I have all my great little notes here. So one of the things to be clear about is for each one of us is to not overindulge in any type of substances, including the alcohol, because when we overindulge, and each one of us knows what that means to us, to each other, then we lower our inhibitions, which means then we lower our awareness of when we're starting to build up to saying something that we will later regret, or even feel like, well, I don't regret that, which isn't a great way to leave a get-together either. So we need to, at that time, take care of ourselves by not overdoing it in any way. Also, if we're going to be talking about what we want or need, it's important to look at the sort of 101 of boundaries, which is I statements. That I would like this. I would like people to stay away from the subject of politics. Or I would like people, because we're having a smaller get together, to observe, what the boundaries are that I'm asking for, and to be realistic. So we just need to be aware of that and to own what we want, because typically in something like that, if you've had too much to drink, or it doesn't even matter if you've been drinking, if we have an issue with someone else, we start getting into it by saying you, and we point fingers. You did this, you did that, you blah, blah, rather than the I statements of it hurts my feelings when you say this. I feel hurt. I feel upset. I feel cornered. And again, they may not be able to hear us. And I don't know about you, but I know certain people in my family at times who weren't willing and weren't able to hear anybody else's point of view. And so for me to try to share my point of view, when it falls on deaf ears, it might not be worth it unless I'm really sticking up for a boundary for myself. Does that make sense? For those of you I can see.
Yes, it makes sense, Teresa.
Thank you. Thanks, Heather. So let's say something's going on, and the one where we talk about somebody with an addiction issue who's coming to the party. I don't know what your experience is, but if the person is still using, you might have to make a boundary statement before that about, I'd really like to have you here, but we're going to be limiting our intake, it might be that you're going to say, no, none of us here are doing methamphetamines today, which is kind of a joke, but not a joke. So if you're going to set that up as the standard, but in my experience, and this comes more from my work with the women at Angela House, if someone's truly in their addiction, they aren't going to show up because they're in a place of too much shame and they don't want to hear their family members judge them or say something to me, any of us, that we don't want to come off as, oh my God, I'm going to be the person who's going to be attacked this year. And then that brings us into another element, which is, are any of us that family member? You know, are we the ones who go in there and after a couple of drinks, because we can't stand to hear so-and-so and we're going to drink to tolerate it better, are we that person who becomes obnoxious and bombastic? And I think it behooves us to be aware of what are our areas of vulnerability before we show up or go into a gathering like this. You know, is someone going to say something about our weight? Is someone going to say something about this? And are we going to let it hit that trigger point to where we overreact? Or are we going to be aware of what those triggers might be and choose how to handle it differently? And each of us has to look at that for ourselves of, you know, who do we want to take? Which one of us or parts of us do we want to show up at that family get together, even if we're the person who's hosting it? You know, do we get to be the arrogant, bossy, I'm going to push everybody else around person? Not that I have ever been bossy in my life or been accused of that. That's totally not true. And that's definitely not how I want to come across. And again, I know if I haven't set boundaries or limits for myself, I can start to feel that resentment and realize that I've missed the opportunity to set a boundary for myself so that I take better care of me, and then I'm taking better care of the people that I'm with also. So we not only have the people that, oh, who are we going to run into? And I think it's important that if you've truly been involved in a toxic relationship with somebody, whether somebody's been abusive verbally or physically or sexually with you in the past, or currently in a family, you have every right to not include that person or to not attend, you know, and you might have to set up something separately to see the people who feel safe to you. I think there's a lot said about forgiveness and being able to forgive people. But I heard this great thing, kind of an explanation used at one point by somebody who said in banks, there's such a thing as a forgiveness loan. And what that means is they'll forgive you the loan that you never paid, that you took out and never paid, but they're not ever going to give you another loan again. And I think we have that right to be able to say, I may forgive somebody, but I don't necessarily have to make myself vulnerable or trust that they're different. So I think we need to be aware of that for ourselves. Trying to keep an eye on the time. So some of the things, if we're back at the actual party, at the get-together, and there might be multiple get-togethers, that you think ahead of time about how long am I going to give myself to stay there, and be realistic about that. You know, if I really want to be there, I might want to stay longer. If I don't, I'm going to put in for a little bit, or to be aware if somebody starts going down a particular path, to say, oh, you could take a short break and I'm just going to go for a walk. I'm going to go out back and see how things are here, go walk around the neighborhood and look at Christmas lights, even if it's at 2:00 in the afternoon. And that way we give ourselves a moment to pause and to take a deep breath. And then go, oh, okay. So that we have enough time to calm ourselves down, which is also known as grounding techniques, so that if the intensity of the situation has started to grow, and actually it's the intensity of our feelings, internal feelings, that, uh-oh, I'm reaching a point where I'm going to make a choice to say something that I really don't want to say, or actually that I'm dying to say, but might regret later, then that's when, we take a walk, we take a deep breath, and we bring that intensity down at least to, if it's a, 1 out of a 10, we're back down to a 4, so that we can compose ourselves and not regret saying things that we might say. I don't know how many of you have ever said something and then later on you're going, why did I let myself go there? Why did I bite the bait? And some people are really good at putting the bait out there. And if we're not aware of it and haven't really thought about it ahead of time, it can take us there, especially when it's an area of vulnerability for shame. I think, and Brene Brown talks about this, she's incredible with it. But I think then when we go into a place of shame, because we haven't really thought about it or prepared ourselves for the situation, or the likelihood that somebody might come in and say, remember when you did, or if you're showing up and you're in recovery and somebody says, and how long is it going to last this time? That it's really easy to go into a place of shame. And one of the ways that we can respond to that is we're going to fight shame with shame. We're going to come back and say something just as nasty to the other person, or else we're going to kind of do this freeze, which is, oh, you're so right. You're so right. Or we will then pull away and just disappear because, if we've confronted our worst fears, somebody's going to judge me and push me away, and I'm going to get out of there faster than they can push me. So if we think about it ahead of time, we don't have to jump into either of those three any of those three responses. And we can say, you're right. I have had trouble with my recovery and I am really working hard on it now. I just want to let you know that. And thanks for asking. You might mumble some other little words under your breath, but you don't have to say them out loud at that point. So I think that's for us to be aware of. And we all have a point, whether it's about somebody else's addiction, our own addiction, our own uncomfortableness with somebody saying something about our weight, or why haven't you married that person yet, or why haven't you had a kid yet? I'm waiting for you to have a kid. And then, we lose our cool. And I don't know about y'all, but I don't look great when I lose my cool. And I don't feel good either. So, so again, back to examine our expectations, be realistic, okay? Not only about what you expect if you're the person doing the party, what you expect to happen or accomplish, or every dish is going to be perfect. The setting is going to be perfect. Everyone's going to get along. And if they don't get along, it's your fault. That's not realistic. So be clear about that. Be aware of what our triggers are. So again, we're examining our expectations like, oh my gosh, that just isn't going to happen. No one's going to say this to me or that to me. And they might. And I think when we go in, we're a little more protected, and we're protecting ourselves, and we have a right to do that. No matter whether someone's attacking us or we just feel attacked. So I also wanted to bring up that for many of us, I think being selfish is like the end all be all, we're going straight to hell. When I think, in fact, there is such a thing as healthy selfishness, that we get to take care of ourselves, that we need to. If we're turning that over to somebody else is going to step up and, be my protector here, we're not taking good care of ourselves. And we need to be able to take care of who we are and what we value, and that we are valuable. We're not just there to be the latest holiday doormat, to be walked on. So that is when I think about us having more compassion for ourselves. And I think at times, if we're going to be there and we're listening to somebody else, we might take the role more of, instead of being an active participant, that I'm an observer. I'm going to step back a little bit and I'm just going to observe what's going on without making a judgment about it. But just, so Uncle Joe said this, and then Aunt Susie handled it, got upset. I wonder what that's about. And to be curious about what is going on. I think that helps us in that way. Again, to take some of the sting out of what could be going on when we let ourselves step into it and become more active. So looking at my other notes here, keep the conversations neutral, resist the bait, and most of all, don't think that we're going to go in and we're going to be able to fix somebody if we only show them what they're doing wrong. I think most of us are aware of what we're doing wrong, and we really don't appreciate the suggestion or advice when somebody walks in to say, let me tell you what you need to do. I don't really want to hear at that particular moment, this is what you need to do. So let's be aware of that. And to go back to the idea of self-care prior to and throughout the holidays, and in particular at a get-together, to give yourself permission to, like I said, get up, go take a walk, take a deep breath. And I think one of the things that, as far as grounding techniques, is stepping back, and I'm just going to observe. I mean, you could start observing, how many pieces of pie are in the room, and it lets you just calm down just enough. And I don't think we can, when I say fix somebody, if somebody comes in and they are sad, or somebody's just lost their mom or their dad, that you can't just say, come on, you got to get with the fun here. That to say, let me know what I can do to be there for you, rather than to fix somebody. So I have one other thing. So how do you handle it if somebody keeps on pushing the point? When you've said, let's not go there. And so it dies down for a little bit, and then they're kind of back at it again. How do we handle that? Well, we handle it the same way. We sound like a broken record, which is really, I don't want to go there today. We're here just to enjoy each other today. So let's just be here to enjoy each other. And then what's not to enjoy about discussing who lost or who won the election? And it's like, we're just not going to go there. And then if you have to, you remove yourself from that. And then in that way, you're taking kind of the wind out of their sails, that they don't have an audience and you don't have to be someone's audience. Somebody just asked a question, which I don't know if now's the time. They wanted to know more about Angela House. Is that something, I don't know who asked for that. Is that somebody who works for the Women's Fund?
No, it's not someone who works for the Women's Fund.
Okay. Oh, okay. I see you.
It's one of our board members. So maybe
Okay.
question and answers, and then you can tell us about Angela House because you'll have a wonderful mission.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah, I can probably talk about Angela House all day long. And the Women's Fund works with Angela House. So that's been a blessing for us. So I just have a few more minutes. I'm really kind of finished with what I wanted to say. And I feel funny just kind of blurping it all out there at everyone. So, I just saw in the chat room, somebody said, I wish my friend who has that brother was on. I'll direct her to the recording. Yeah, everybody has a brother or an aunt or an uncle, and they come with a family, Sometimes they spice it up, and sometimes they overdo it on the jalapenos. And we just have to be aware of what our tolerance is, and being able to be clear about that without being nasty about it. I think there's a big difference between being aggressive and being assertive. That assertive, again, is about us being clear with our boundaries. Aggressive is like beating somebody over the head with it. And I had a wonderful mentor, still have her, therapist friend, Pat Hogan, who once said, you can't do therapy with a 2x4. And you can't treat people with a 2x4, and they don't change when you knock them upside of the head that way. So I think it's important to remember that. So, any questions? And if you want it, put it in the chat, you can, or you can just ask it now if you want to.
Okay, so we do have one question in the chat right now.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do with that person who makes you feel guilty about your boundaries?
Well, that's a good question. And it's really important because anytime we set boundaries with someone, anyone, their first thing is go back to being who you were. I don't like this person who has the boundaries. Go back to being who you were. And guilt, we can learn how to deal with, which, if you were to look at it, setting boundaries, again, doesn't mean you're selfish, doesn't mean you're wrong. It means this is what I'm doing to take care of myself. And you might have to have that little mantra in your head that it's okay for me to take care of myself. It's okay for me to take care of myself. And that, yeah, it's like setting a boundary with a kid. They don't like it when you set boundaries, but sometimes that's a big part of being a parent, is that you have to set boundaries. Like, really, it's not okay for you to stick your hand in that fire. And that one seems like, well, that's pretty obvious, but to the kid, it's like, well, I was just wanting to see what it was like. So, and I'm not making light of the fact that some people are really good at trying to make us feel guilty. And you could, compliment them on that, in fact, to say, oh my gosh, I hadn't realized how good you were at making me feel bad for taking care of myself. I'm really going to have to work on feeling better about taking care of myself. I like to use humor when I can, to diffuse a situation. So, you know, you might find something, but usually at that point you're not feeling so ha-ha about it. But if you think about it ahead of time, you might. Um, and to say, gosh, I am so glad you are being true to yourself. You know, I knew that you would want to kind of, you know, point this out to me, that I really shouldn't do this. And I'm feeling right now that I really do need to do it. So I appreciate it if you would, you know, we'll just let this stop right now.
That's great advice. Great advice. So I have a question. I know that holding on to stuff or letting things kind of bottle up is not good for us, especially in the long term. It can lead to some damage and some issues. How do we approach difficult conversations with family early on so that things don't get to that point and we don't have to become that person?
Okay. Well, again, I think it's all in the approach. To say, you know, to acknowledge, I really care about our relationship. And I've been holding on to some things, and I want to be able to talk about them. And I just want you to be able to hear me, and then stick with I statements. Not, you did this, you did that, you're a horrible person, but this is how I am feeling. And then to ask for what you want, because that's kind of taking ultimate responsibility in self-care, you know, that you're stating, you know, what your need is and asking. That doesn't mean you'll get it, but at least you tried. And the issue with bottling things up because we think, oh, I don't want to make a scene, I don't want to make the other person feel bad, is that when we have had enough, then what comes out makes it, we damage the relationship that much more by holding on to that and then, blah, you know, puking all that up, you know, because then you have to clean that up. And then the real issue was not ever addressed, you know. And I also think you kind of have to have a feel for whether, and I say, whether they can hear it and take any responsibility for their part. And that might be the other part for us to look at if we're trying to do it. What piece, no matter how small, large, or whatever, can we own and say, I really feel like I probably wasn't very clear with this, with you. So it really wasn't fair to you. But I want to be clear about that issue now.
Thank you for that. I really like that piece about you saying, telling them what you want. Because I've used I statements before, but I guess I've never really gotten to that part of that process.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Have any of you ever been with a fight with your spouse, your boyfriend, girlfriend, and they're like, I know you're mad, but what are you mad about? And you're like, well, if you really loved me, you would know. You know, because that takes all the responsibility off of us to say, hey, this is what's bothering me, and this is what I need. You know, I had one woman recently who was talking about, wanting to spend more time with her husband. And she came up with this great idea. He wants to sit there and play a video game. And she wanted to go shopping. And I looked at her and I said, I don't know about your husband, but my husband would, rather, hit himself in the head with a hammer than go shopping. So you might have to find another way to say, hey, this is what I'd like to do together. Or you find somebody else to go do it with. And that's not my way of giving permission for cheating, but you find a girlfriend to go shopping with. Okay.
Okay. So the next question that I have is, for many, the end of the year is kind of a time to reflect on where we are and also to think about where we want to be. And I know that throughout your presentation, you mentioned multiple times that family members can be a little intrusive, asking, when are you going to get married? When are you going to have children? And unintentionally, they may be making us feel worse. Just because we know it's coming doesn't make it any easier. Do you have any advice for people who may be going through this?
Okay, I'm not sure if I'm clear on the question, but reflecting about how their year is gone or how to handle somebody who is pushing a point.
Yeah, so I guess it's more so about trying to handle someone who's pushing a point, whether it be to be married or have kids. We may have our own thoughts or feelings about these things, but then you're getting all that pressure from a family member. So if you had any advice on how to handle that.
Kind of going back and say, I hear, even if you don't really hear it, I hear that you really care, and what's best for me. And that's something I'm really kind of thinking about and I don't know that I'm ready, or if you even want to give that, but I'm really giving it a lot of thought. So thank you for bringing that up again.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now if you want to go ahead and answer the first question that we had earlier, asking you to talk a little bit about Angela House for those who are not familiar with Angela House.
Angela House is a transitional living facility for women just getting out of prison or jail. We offer a safe place for women to come live. We don't charge for them to live there. We don't charge for food or clothing or hygiene, any of that. We want them to come because we know for many, they don't have other options except to go back to what took them to prison or jail in the first place. And this is a chance to maybe offer something different. We're a pretty structured program, and we're small. We only take 16 women at a time maximum. That we have lots of classes for the women, like the Women's Fund comes and talks. We have people who do parenting classes, Bible study classes. I teach the Seeking Safety, which is a trauma-informed course on how to develop healthy coping skills for both trauma/PTSD and or substance abuse. And I think the two of trauma and substance abuse can go hand in hand. We have trauma-informed yoga classes. Of course, we've been doing a lot of things by Zoom lately. The women go to Mercy Street from Chapelwood Methodist. They come out and they're now in person doing kind of a faith-based class for women to look at what their spirituality and to explore that some more. We have lots of meetings, whether it's AA or NA, that we offer to the women. And we ask that the women commit to at least 4 months because that's a minimum amount of time to, many women come in and they don't have a driver's license, they don't have an ID, they don't have a birth certificate, they haven't seen a doctor in I don't know how long. So we work with, especially healthcare for the homeless initially, and to get women in to see doctors, psychiatrists, and to work with women I've been working with University of Houston and their eye clinic to get women for free eye exams and glasses lately. So that takes time. We also have a lot of community partners. We work with Career and Recovery, and they teach an outpatient, but via Zoom now, class that's it's an outpatient substance abuse class that in another way, it follows 12 steps, but not like 12 steps recovery, but 12 steps more about moral issues and how you've either betrayed or not lived up to your own morals. And in recovery, how to start, addressing some of those issues. So during that time, until you complete career and recovery and can get a number of our classes under your belt, we don't let the women work. So when they complete career and recovery, we have people like from University of Houston and other places who come in and have helped with writing resumes. Our case manager, Sarah, does a great job with helping the women with their resumes. And then how to handle an interview where someone's going to say, oh, so you were in prison, which puts somebody into a whole place of shame and feeling stereotyped and labeled, and is not a comfortable place for them. So we have to help them. How are you going to handle that situation? Just like we've been talking about today, who's going to bring up something that's going to put you into a place of shame, and how to protect yourself and say, you know, you're right. You know, that's in my past. I'm really working on, you know, changing my behavior and to try to do things differently. Not until then, in fourth month about can they start looking for work. Once they start working, 75% of what they earn goes into a savings account that they get when they graduate from the program. So in a very roundabout, not so roundabout way, we force women to save their money while they're there, because when they get out, they will have higher deposits, you know, to make on an apartment because people don't trust them, or you know, higher rents to pay because trying to get out of the neighborhoods where they were, utilities, things like that. So they have more money there. And then they also then have the balance of, when I say we ask for them to commit to 4 months, I think the women who stay longer, like up to a year, do better in that they save more money, but they figure out the balance of how do I go to work, maintain a home, still go and participate and be focused on my recovery. They still have to see me, the therapist there, and they can continue to see me for free after they leave Angela House. But how do I balance all that without falling back into relapse and feeling overwhelmed? And there's no way I can do this without using something. Okay, so that is Angela House in a nutshell.
Well, thank you so much for that. Angela House is awesome. I love working with the women there and giving the presentations. We took some time off because of COVID, and once we were able to start rescheduling classes, I was so excited. I definitely look forward to our classes each month when we have them. So if anyone has any other questions, please put them in the chat. I'm going to share my screen one last time before we leave. Teresa, if you have any final words of wisdom or any—
Yeah, that's a great old picture of me, by the way. Thanks. I haven't aged at all. So great. If you have questions, let me know now.
Right, and if there's something that you think of later, I walk away from presentations sometimes and I'm like, oh, that was great. And then a few days later, I have a question. You can always email the Women's Fund staff at healtheducator@thewomensfund.org. In the follow-up email that I send, I will also link the survey that we have for this presentation. We would greatly appreciate if you would take the survey and provide us with some feedback. Let us know what you liked, what we could improve on, topics that you would be interested in hearing about. If you do take the survey, you will be entered to win a $25 gift certificate. As far as upcoming presentations, you can always find what we have coming up next on our website, thewomensfund.org. Also, please follow us on our social media sites. We do post about our events there as well. For the rest of the week, we have a presentation on sleep hygiene and then a presentation on germs. Those are scheduled for Friday. And we have some repeat presentations next week as well. So I want to thank you all so much for joining us today for this presentation. Teresa, thank you so much for giving us your time and all of this wonderful knowledge. We greatly appreciate this. I know everyone in the comments is saying how wonderful this was. Oh, there is one final question. How to deal with a borderline personality disorder relative?
Well, my first thought is who diagnosed the person borderline? And borderline is a lovely label that gets put on somebody. So, and I'm being sarcastic about that. So it kind of brings up, there are different behaviors you can see. Somebody being borderline is typically, very black and white. You can do one small thing, and the relationship's over. And I think you just have to be yourself, and be aware of that. And they're going to take things how they take things. And then if they bring it up, you can say, that's certainly not how I meant it. But since you brought that up, I could hear that it might have, it might have felt that way. That's the best thing that I can do. And also to be clear about your boundaries, okay? Because they may not want you to have any. It's kind of that mom who gives and gives and gives and gives. What was that book that I hated? The Giving Tree, until the tree's chopped down. I thought, what a horrible thing to tell somebody, let yourself be chopped down, as a tree, but that we have so much to give and so much to offer to somebody that that's the best that we can be. I don't really know I don't know that there's a great answer to how to deal with somebody who's that way, but again, be aware of your boundaries and to not fall prey to feeling guilty. Or if you feel guilty, then talk about it with somebody the next day. Okay? So then she can go, oh, wait a minute. I don't really have anything to feel guilty about. Okay?
Alrighty, thank you so much for answering that final question. And again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to email us at healtheducator@thewomensfund.org. Again, thank you, Teresa. Other than that, I hope you have a great rest of your day.
I hope everybody does too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.